Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Death and Other Details, Season 1, Episode 7. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So I really like that we take this element we've kind of seen before now when they're kind of revisiting certain like memories and stuff like that, how it's kind of like interactive and just, it was just like the how they've kind of utilized that in the past, and I love how we switch it up this episode to kind of have Imogen replace Rufus in all these memory moments because she's going through it. It's like, right, you're gonna like show me through all the details of everything you went through, everything you experienced along this case, so that I can see what you missed. What Llewellyn had said that you had missed last episode. I just thought that was such a like nice framing device for this episode to be kind of be depicted that way, and just like it just that because it kind of gets them. So, because I guess it makes sense because you're supposed to be so sucked into it, like as in like Imogen is supposed to be sucked into it, supposed to be so in it that she's able to kind of visualize and see and make sure she doesn't miss any nuance or details to the whole situation by stepping into Rufus's shoes. It still doesn't quite answer some of the questions I had previously of, does Danny know about Rufus being a fraud? Because it does seem like it is a thing of, no, he did fake it till he made it. So it's like, yeah, I stumbled my way here, but I guess he did study the craft enough, or he is himself crafty enough, and then just learning experience along the way of his decades of just being a detective, they ended up filling in that gap for him. Like whatever he was lacking as a detective, he was able to make up for it over the years. Like maybe that's kind of what it is, because Danny never called him out for it. Because my whole point last episode is like, well, we know that he like concocted this whole story about himself back in '92. That was before he met Danny, because him and Danny have known each other. He said like they were friends for like 20 years. So that preceded all of that. So once again, we never got an answer for it. But it was interesting seeing that Danny initially didn't want Rufus to take the Collier job, which Imogen's like, but you're saying he's the one that convinced you. It's like, yeah, but that's before he had met you. It's because basically Danny was worried about his reputation. It's like, if you mess this up, Collier's a big enough name that if you mess this up, everyone's going to hear about it. It's going to destroy your reputation. Now that line of dialogue in particular makes me feel like Danny knew that he was a fake, but at the very least was like, no, but you've become competent enough. Once again, you faked it till you made it, and you made it. So, but like that facade of yours that you've created over the years could go like sunny side up, or pear shaped rather, if you screw up this Collier job. So he was initially like, don't take it. And so, obviously, we get the events of a lot of stuff we got in the first episode, and I really like how they handled it. Like, she tried to talk to Llewellyn, but she couldn't really get an answer out of him because she's trying to jump ahead. It's like, he can't give you the answers he doesn't know, which I thought was so interesting. But, like, obviously, she's trying to, like, oh, what was it? What was it? But then, Rufus is like, don't worry, we'll talk to him later. But like I said, we get this like rehash a little bit, kind of a different perspective on the first episode in the beginning and the flashbacks with a young Imogen and Rufus. And I love the approach where it's like Imogen didn't play out the entire scene. She was on the other side of the dollhouse like Rufus, but it's like looking at yourself, coming face to face to yourself. It's so meta and so beautifully constructed for like this very like the way, like I said, it just adds an extra layer to the framing device, using like having Imogen come face to face to herself in so many ways. It's poetic and there's layers to it. But I think it's so interesting that it's like, okay, she doesn't even finish. She doesn't even say, oh, I'm Rufus. She doesn't interact with her young self. She just walks away, and Rufus is like, aren't you going to like do the interview part? She's like, no, I remember that part of things. So what's the point? But it's like, I guess it makes sense. I mean, but for one, I just think it's so interesting to give yourself a storytelling reason of like, well, we don't need to rehash this because I remembered. So it's almost like we as the audience, like, well, yeah. I mean, if you remembered it enough, it's like, right, we've already seen it, so we don't need to see it again. So I think it's kind of neat doing that, because there is stuff they show us again, but once again, you get a different perspective on things. That's a conversation that Imogen feels like she wouldn't get anything out of because she remembers all the details. I even love later on she beats herself up for like that we get a different perspective with the whole her deciphering Rufus's code in his book, his notebook, because for her it's like, I can't remember a detail I'm supposed to remember what happened at that that restaurant or whatever. I can't remember who my mom met, but I can remember like the smell of you and all these other details. And Rufus like, I told you, Mary's a bitch. Like, no, not a bitch, a motherfucker. It's like, yeah, because your memory could be so fickle. You can remember certain things and then just completely forget other stuff. And I just thought that was so interesting, and how it pisses her off. Like, the one detail that might be the key to unraveling this entire mystery, and I can't remember. Yet I can remember all this bullshit about Rufus. I can remember every other detail except for this very important thing. And the reason why she couldn't remember ends up being such a heartbreaking and sad reason why she can't remember it. But we'll get to that when we get to it. But I do like that we kind of, I forgot what episode it was. It had to be like episode 2 or 3 when Rufus was interviewing everyone. We kind of get a little like past version of that. Talking to I'm butchering his name every time I'm saying, because I'm like, it's Llewellyn. It's how you say it, but every time I get ready to say it, I stumble on it. I'm so sorry. But Llewellyn ended up interviewing Lawrence and Catherine, and even because Imogen's grandmother, wasn't her name like Diana? I believe it's Diana. I just keep blanking on Imogen's mom's name. It was Kira, right? I believe so. I'm sorry if I end up saying it wrong, but I do believe it's Kira, but I could be mistaken. But yeah, we meet her grandma, because she did have other family, but it's like there was no one else. It's like with her mom gone, the dad's out of the picture. The way it seems like we know where he is. I guess just Imogen wants nothing to do with her dad. He's just not important to the story at all. Because it's like, yeah, because at the time they were saying like he was in California, so he does have like a alibi or whatever. Like if there was, usually the spouse kind of did it type of thing. So, but he hasn't, because Danny went to go check on that. So that's all we really get mentioned. But it's like, right, he's not in the picture. He hasn't been for a while. And the grandmother has like back issues, so it's like she's not really in a position to be raising a little girl. So that's why Catherine and Lawrence decided that they were going to take her in. Imogen also learns an interesting thing in this episode. She finds out that Rufus never quit looking into her mom's investigation. He kept going at it for like up until present day. Now, this is actually what I thought was going to be the revelation at the end of episode 1, where we thought, like, I figured, like, oh, Rufus has actually been looking into it the entire time. But then we got that scene with Danny in episode 2 where he was like, oh, we need to get on the ship. We need to get answers to that little girl you made that promise to. So I was like, oh, so he hadn't been working on it the entire time? It's like, no, in fact, he was. But he skewed things to make it seem like he didn't. He wanted to make it seem like Danny's the one that really pushed him to do something. So it probably even up until before the ship took off, because Danny's the one that kind of set everything up to get them on the ship. But it's like, maybe Rufus was feeling very melancholy and down, but he had still been working on what he felt like, oh, we have no like actual evidence or anything to grasp onto, until Danny brought them this whole situation. That's when he was probably pecked him up again. But he was drowning his sorrows regardless. We saw that even when he was like still investigating everything, basically like at that point in the story when they were like, oh, like more than a decade later, that was like 15 years later, that he had, or a decade and a half, he had still continued investigating Victor Sands. So it was like, once only knew a name, but Danny ended up uncovering some guy that was also being like disconnected to some, like, it was like there was some hacker group that had kind of gotten to this guy, and he was trying to put a whole bunch of money into like finding out who was responsible, and the only thing he could come up with this name was Victor Sands. And it's like, right, been active for the past 15 years. I mean, God knows how long Victor was like active even before him, but maybe in that 15-year period, Victor just grew and grew and grew and became the unstoppable force, this unknown, unseen entity that they are now, essentially. Maybe they were always a powerful person and just became even more powerful, or maybe they were kind of on the smaller scale and just expedited their growth in that time frame with just stuff related to the Colliers and stuff. It's interesting too, little details kind of came up during some of those conversations really quickly. Like Lawrence kind of made it clear like nothing ever happened between him and Kira. It was more like, he's like, oh, I'm devoted to my wife. He's like, there's two type of men in the world. I think he specifically said there are two types of heterosexuals. There are the type of men who want every woman in the world, and there's the men that want to be just allocated to one person. He's like, I'm that person. So it's like, I wonder, was he putting up a front, or is he just the type of person of, he knows that his wife is having an affair, but he loves her so much he doesn't want to say anything because he's afraid. He doesn't want to put, like, he just wants to say, like, right, let her get out of her system because I love her and I am duly devoted to her. Or is that just him being a scumbag, like an overcompensating scumbag, where it's like, oh, I'm the devoted husband, when in actuality you aren't. There's just like before, there's two ways to go about it. He's presenting himself as, oh, I'm devoted to one woman, but who's to say that's the case? I don't know. Llewellyn did say something really interesting, like after the 15 years of investigating stuff, he was like, right, if you don't stop this, like the Colliers will basically will destroy you or whatever. But he said this line where he was like, you're not listening to what I'm saying, and I guess it felt like that was almost like, wait, was that Llewellyn trying to like sneak something in there? But then like at that moment, Imogen kind of tuned him out, because she was like, wait, you kept investigating the entire time. It's like, well, then why'd you walk away? And the reason why he did is because Lawrence, Catherine, as well as Imogen's grandmother told him to do this, because at that point it had been months. He hadn't really made any progress other than getting Victor Sam's name. And it's like, right, he's the one that's like, Imogen is so great. Like, the fact is, that girl is just super talented, and you want her to live a normal, boring life, sure, whatever, but it's not going to give her closure about what happened to her mom. Plus, you'll stifle her gifts, and they're like, fine, her gift, she won't be as gifted, and she won't be as great, but she'll be okay. She'll be able to sleep at night without having nightmares. You're just making things worse for her. And Rufus felt like that was right. Like, right, no matter how much promise I see in you, how much I feel like I owe this to you, I owe it to you to have some form of a childhood. But even she said, like, Rufus, like, those nightmares didn't go away. I still ended up having them. Like, because now it begs the question, like, did Lawrence, because her grandmother definitely seemed to have her best interest at heart. And I wonder, is her grandma not alive anymore? I mean, once again, it's been like 20 years, well, 18 years, so we don't know whether she's still around or not. But Lawrence and Catherine, did they really do it out of altruistic reasons? Because they make it seem like, oh, they really cared for Kira and Imogen, but it's like, no, is that just to kind of clear their own guilty conscience? Or was there some level of, well, we got to find out how much they really, really knew, and the moment they found out that Imogen didn't really know anything, that's, but there could be sincerity in them being like, no, we do actually care for her, but it's hard to say, like, people's motivations. It's really hard to read what's in someone's heart, I love that whole scene at the restaurant, because they ended up finding out that, obviously, the day that scene we had seen previously of Imogen and her mom at the restaurant, that was because she went to go meet someone at that time, too. But we kind of get that scene again, and, that was after they showed up there asking one of the cooks, which I saw the actor that they were talking, the guy they were talking to, one of the cooks, like, I just seen him in, like, I want to say just this week's episode of Tracker, just saw him in that, so I think it's the same actor if I'm not mistaken. But essentially, it turns out this guy has a gambling problem, and he thought that they were, like, coming there to get money from him. That's why he was going to run. But the moment he found out, he recognized Rufus, it's like, oh, you're this famous detective, so he was going to make some money off of him. But it's like, yeah, if you don't give us the information we want, Rufus is like, I'm going to find the people you owe money to, and I'm going to bring them here to you, or bring you to them, whichever the case was going to be. And I love that Danny had said previously, when he ran into the cook guy, he was like, oh, my partner's going to really like you. And then after Rufus said that, like, Danny was like, see, I told you, like, but he's the one that gave him information about, yes, she was, once again, there to meet somebody, but he heard them arguing, but he didn't get the context of what it was, and now it was up to Imogen. Because part of me, as we were kind of diving into this, and Imogen couldn't remember, I'm like, well, could she not remember because she never actually, you're trying to force a memory that you don't actually have? That's what I was curious about. I was like, maybe you never heard the conversation, but it's like, no, she did, because they did, like, the whole notebook scene of, like, deciphering his code, that was in correlation to that, like her trying to remember who her mom was trying to meet with, but she couldn't. And so Imogen, it's like she set off on this journey, so she has to be the one. So it's like her sitting down with herself and trying to talk to herself. But the moment the other version of herself was like, I can't, I made a promise, I was like, who's the one person you would make a promise to that you would never break? And I was like, of course it ended up being her mom, because I'm like, it makes the most sense, because your mom's gone now, and it's like, for you, it's like, if I break this promise, it's like the last thing between me and my mom was a promise, and if I break that, like, and I never break my promises, especially to my mom, like it. So it makes it's like, in that moment I was like, it has to be related to your mom. She made you forget this, or bury this, as we find out later on. But I love that whole sequence where it's like very trippy. It feels very Inception-y. You know, it was also giving me Legion vibes, because Legion would do a lot of weird, like, dream sequency shit like that, which is it's one of the dope things about Legion being the weird show that it was. But yeah, it kind of had like very Inception-y vibes, with just like bouncing from like the dream sequence stuff like they did like that. I just thought that was so cool, like how that was all done. And I love that, basically, because she's kind of, I think, running deeper into her own subconscious while she's like trying to get to these answers, that everything's starting to bleed together. There was this moment where we saw Llewellyn, he was kind of singing and dancing, and she noticed he has like a mole on his face. I was like, what the hell is that about? Is that supposed to sing? What's that? I'm like, does that correlate to his death or something? Once again, it sounded like he got electrocuted and that's why he fell off, but maybe that was just a natural process. Maybe it's just, because we haven't circled back to that, because it's like, well, he fell off, and it's like, well, they can't retrieve his body, but like, oh, he was electrocuted. It sounded like there was an electrical surge when he was there that kind of shocked him and forced him to let go. But, you know, once again, if they're even able to retrieve their body, they're in the middle of the, like, ocean, so probably not. It'd probably take a while to find his body potentially anyway, so. Her chasing after her younger self led her back to the car explosion, and obviously and it parallels the first episode so beautifully, where young Imogen was kind of taken back to that moment, and her mom tells her to get out of the car. She's like, no, I don't want to, please don't make me. And then, you know, sadly it happens anyway, like, because her younger self is like, you're not going to want to see this again, and she tries to face it, but she's there, and it's almost like this Batman v Superman moment of just like, to me, I think it's one of the most beautiful, like, cinematic moments, because it's such a, like, Superman moment to some extent, where it's just like the entire, like, courthouse was on fire, the building's on fire, and he's the one person in the entire building completely fine. Just, there's something like sad and like there's something so, like, it's such beautiful imagery, beautiful in the sense of just like how tragic it means, but it felt like such a ooh moment. It's one of the things that kind of sticks out the most, of like that scene, that shot in particular. It just kind of reminded me of that. But her in the middle of the car, and Rufus is like, what are you so afraid of? And for her, it's like, what? She's like, I'm not afraid of anything, and finally admits it. What if I saw who killed my mom, and it's buried here deep down inside? What if the reason why Victor Sands has been able to do whatever he's been able to is because I've never been able to conjure up this memory and tell people the truth about what I've seen, who I saw. And it's like, that would mean everything Victor's done over these past 18 years is my fault. And Rufus is like, maybe it is, but kind of maybe it isn't. But it's like, what are you going to do about it? So she lets the scene play out. And then there's this moment when her mom had told her, like, hey, return this. She had a look on her face that I was like, we didn't see that look before. Like, she had a very sullen look on her face. And even Imogen's like, are you still sad about that conversation you had with the woman? And her mom's like, what'd you say? It's like, wait, you saw that? And she did. And we travel back to that memory, and it turns out the person her mom was talking to was Alexandra, because she was trying to take down the Colliers for the Captium Blue situation. It's like, so your mom knew about that. She was a whistleblower, and it's like, yeah, like, I'm sorry that you and that what she said made you and that other woman sad. You're like, wait, other person? And it's like, yeah. And so her mom made her promises, like, promise me you'll keep that buried deep down inside. And once again, that's what it wasn't trauma that kept this buried deep inside. She did what her mom did. She was a little girl keeping her promise, and so subconsciously she buried it and didn't want to ever bring it up to the surface. Once again, because it would be breaking a promise that she made with her mom. And I think on some psychological level, you could look at it as, like, once again, it's the last tie that she has to her mom, and if she breaks it, it's like the last thing that binds her and her mom would be gone. So, and she didn't want, it's like, I need to be a good girl for my mom and keep the promise for her, you know? So there's layers of that was kind of like holding, like chaining those memories. And ultimately, it's like, right, the woman with the mole, that's where the Llewellyn situation was coming from. And so ultimately we get the reveal the person, because it was like, right, your husband died, and then the camera spins and reveals it was oh god, they said her name in the episode, but it's Grandma Chun, Eleanor's grandmother. I was like, you were the one that was going to come forward about your husband worked in the factory. That's the irony. Like, Anna has no idea that because she's the one that cleaned up the whole Capsium Blue situation, and obviously it put their family in even dire situations because of it. But either way, the thing she was cleaning up was Eleanor's grandfather's death. He was one of many people who died, but this directly connects to the Chuns because Eleanor's grandfather died because of the Capsium Blue stuff. And it's like, interesting. So that kind of ties this together, where it's just like Alexandra wasn't. It makes you wonder, was the Capsium Blue stuff anywhere in, well, because she initially chose not to like pursue any of that because she's like, no judge is going to take it. It's like, was she doing that because she legit, like, was Alexandra just feeling like, I don't have a chance of, like, I'll get laughed out of court or whatever, like no judge is actually going to listen? Was she, because we know she's eventually on the Collier's payroll, was that before then, or was she already on their payroll? So was she trying to shut that down because of that? Did she, like, she doesn't seem like she had any guilt over what happened to Kira, so I'm assuming she had no idea. Like, she might not have been working with the Colliers yet, and probably that was like, because that meeting at the restaurant was like a month before she died in the car explosion, so Alexandra might not have worked with the Colliers yet, and by the time she did, that was kind of a moot point because Kira had long since been dead, maybe? That's the justification? But now it puts Grandma Chun's, like, motivations into perspective. That's what this whole takeover has been about. It's about sticking it to the people you blame for killing your husband. And so many other people, they were able to get away with so many deaths, and it's like, that's what this was about. It's about getting, it's about get back. Like, Eleanor had no idea about any of this, and that's what this. So probably when she was presented the opportunity, she probably jumped at it, telling Eleanor, like, no, because I think Anna went to Eleanor, not unless Eleanor reached out to Anna. I don't remember them specifying who reached out to who. I feel like it was Anna reaching out to Eleanor, but whether it was Eleanor reaching out or whether it was just her accepting Anna's, like, you know, about this cooperation, her grandmother probably nudged her to do it. But now it's like getting 51% of the Collier meals makes sense. It's like she wants to take this from them. What was taken from her, she's been playing the long game, trying to find an opportunity to take them down because she tried to go the legal route. It didn't work. So let's do some corporate mergers and take this from them. And maybe this also plays into why Lawrence is so gung-ho about taking this deal. Once again, maybe it's more directly correlated to Victor Sands, or maybe it's a situation of because Lawrence doesn't seem like the type that would know that Grandma Chun's, like, husband was connected to the factory. Because once again, Anna had completely no idea because they didn't matter. That's the sad thing of someone who didn't matter has basically come back to haunt you and basically like jacked your entire company because they have a majority share of the company. So hijacked your entire company. Granted, Lawrence was kind of okay with it. I just don't know why he was so not gun-ho, but just so willing to just hand it over. So. And at the end of the episode, Imogen confronts her. It's like, right, my mom was a whistleblower, and you were the one that was going to, like, come forward about Capsium Blue. And it's just like Tripp is there, so is Eleanor and Anna and Layla. So they're all hearing this revelation. And then, like, you see the smile on Grandma Chun's face, like, oh, it's only a matter of time. So I don't think they've really interacted at all this entire show, but I guess, like, she didn't want her to know because it's like, hey, my plans have to be my plans. You already lost your mom. And maybe even her justification is, like, going for the Collier's jugular isn't just about, because her mom, like, Kira's the only one that ever was willing to try and give her justice. So she's probably not too, like, hurt about Alexandra dying because it's like, you deserve it. Because, like, once again, I don't know if she was in the Collier's pocket at that time or whether she was just a young upstart being like, you know what, I'm not going to put myself in a situation where I could be the laughing stock. I'm not going to take something I know I have no chance of even getting started or even winning. I'm only going to take chances on things I know for sure that I have a good chance of winning. Sure things, you know, I'm not going to take a gamble. So I guess this also goes back to why Llewellyn was like, right, something that was right in front of your face the entire time. It's like, what did he necessarily mean by that? I guess it's like that Imogen knew the entire time, or is it like what's happening right now, the Chuns and the Collier like business deal? It's like, I guess Llewellyn knew about this from the start. Maybe that's also what drove him, like, after Alexandra's death. Like, he must have known. There's no way. Did Kira confide in him about that stuff? Because he obviously had the massive crush on her, but it never, like, went anywhere. So, but I wonder, did she, because, like, why was Alexandra's, and then, like, now we know about Grandma Chun, that it's like, could she be what he was saying, like, oh, what was right in front of you, what you missed all those years ago? We'll ultimately have to wait to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. Only 3 episodes left, so it's going to be interesting. Still plenty of time for some twists and turns and even more reveals, and I'm excited to see what happens next. I'll talk about this after next week's episode, but if I'm not mistaken, I believe episode 8 is going to air on its own, but I want to say episodes 9 and 10 are going to air the same day, like 2 weeks from now. I think they're both going to air back to back. Well, I mean, it's streaming, so it's not really airing back to back, but like they'll both drop 2 weeks from now instead of one at a time. But we'll see. Like, I think I remember that before the show started airing, but I could be mistaken. Either way, like I said, I'm excited to see where all this ends up taking us going forward. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.